At the edge of the northern preserve, just before first light, a shape began to appear each morning where the fence met the old gravel road. Thin, still, and silent, a stray dog standing just outside the rusted gate of the cottage. His body faced forward, but his eyes never lifted. He never barked, never paced. Just wait. The woman inside, May, a quiet figure who tended the native plants along the fence line, first noticed him on a Tuesday. Fog hung low over the grasses, softening every edge. She opened the gate to water her ferns, and there he was. Close, but not too close. She paused. So did he. Then he turned, walked 4 paces back, and sat down facing the trees. His coat was rough and uneven, stretched tight across a lean frame. His ribs pressed lightly against his skin. He had no collar, no band, no tag. Just mud on his legs and old scratches along his flank. May kept her distance, watching from the porch. He didn't seem lost, just waiting. When she took a step forward, he stood. When she stepped back, he sat again. No tail wag, no sound, just quiet calculation, not aggression, not fear. He was measuring her. That morning, he stayed until the sun rose high enough to push the fog away. Then he left, back into the woods, vanishing through the narrow break in the undergrowth where deer sometimes passed. May watched until his outline dissolved into the thickets, then turned to her chores. But something stayed unsettled. The next morning, before sunrise, he was there again. She hadn't told anyone. There was no one to tell. The preserve was wide and mostly quiet, and her cottage, though close to the border, sat a mile from the next nearest home. She hadn't put out food, hadn't offered water, only observed. She thought he might be injured, but he walked without limping. Just slow. Intentionally slow, as if every step had to be considered. On the 3rd morning, she brought a folded blanket and laid it gently on the ground just inside the gate. When she returned an hour later, it hadn't moved, but he had. Closer now, just past the gate line. He was curled low, but not touching the blanket. When she stepped out, he rose immediately, eyes low, body taut. One back paw shifted as if ready to run. She didn't speak, just stood there with hands open at her sides. He didn't run, but he didn't stay either. He slipped again into the woods, leaving no mark behind. The pattern held for 6 mornings. His presence was never announced. No bark. No whimper. Only the faint rustle of movement through brush. Each morning he appeared as the fog thinned, always alone. May began rising earlier, sitting near the window with coffee gone cold in her hands, watching the fence. He arrived like clockwork, never begging, never showing need in any human way, but still, something about him asked to be seen. On the 7th day she opened the gate before he came, left it wide, the blanket freshly shaken, a bowl of water by the post. Then she stepped back inside, leaving the door open behind her. When she looked through the kitchen window, he was already there, standing just at the edge of the threshold, watching. No step forward, no sound. If she moved quickly, he would vanish. If she left the gate closed, he stayed outside. The rhythm was clear. It was his choice. Always. That evening, as dusk turned the trees to shadows, she walked to the edge of the gate and whispered, "You're safe here." Just once, quietly. He didn't answer, didn't move, but he didn't leave either. Not right away. And in the soft breath of wind through the pine, something shifted. If he stayed, she'd let him stay. If he ran, he ran. Either way, she'd be there in the morning. The next morning, May stepped out before first light. The fog had returned, resting low across the roadside grass and folding gently around the trees. She moved with practiced quiet, her footsteps muffled against the earth still wet from last night's rain. In one hand, she carried a shallow bowl of rice and boiled chicken. Not much, just enough to offer something beyond waiting. She placed it just outside the gate this time, not inside. Then she turned, walked back to the porch, and waited where he couldn't see her. It took 10 minutes before the dog appeared. He came from the east today, down the narrow slope where a dry stream bed curved behind the trees. His movement was slow, cautious, but deliberate. He did not pause at the sight of the bowl. He paused where he always did, 5 paces from the gate, near the old stone marker half covered in moss. There he stood still. His nose lifted once, caught the scent, then lowered. His eyes stayed down. His tail, thin and still, hung without motion. May remained behind the window, watching with quiet breath. After a long minute, he stepped forward. One paw, then the next, barely lifting from the ground. He reached the bowl, stood over it. Another pause. Then, finally, he lowered his head and ate. Only after he had finished, slowly, sparingly, did he glance toward the porch. He didn't linger. He turned without sound and vanished into the trees again. No sound of breaking brush, no crunch of twigs, just silence, returned. The next morning, she did it again. This time the bowl was placed on the same spot, always the same spot. And again she stepped back. This time she left the door ajar. Let him hear her movements if he chose to. He arrived 10 minutes after dawn. Every morning after, the timing grew shorter. The space between his arrival and her retreat narrowed by inches. His posture didn't change, still low, still alert, but the rigid line of tension in his spine began to soften. He still wouldn't eat if she was too near, but he no longer waited as long. May noticed the way he approached, not straight on, but at an angle, as if circling prey or remembering old caution. His ears twitched at distant birdsong. His head stayed low. He avoided eye contact. When wind brushed through the gate, his nose lifted slightly, only for a moment. By the 5th morning, he came before she'd even stepped out. He stood waiting at the gate while she opened the door. She paused there, bowl in hand. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she took a few quiet steps, placed the bowl down just inside the gate this time. She looked at him once, gently, and whispered, "You can have it." That day, he waited longer. The placement had changed, and with it, the trust was tested. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then, slowly, he stepped forward. When his paws crossed the gate's line, his body lowered, not crouching, not fearful, just ready to retreat if needed. He ate. Every bite was slow, like each one came with a cost. The ritual was held. It became their language. No sudden movements, no voice above a whisper, no reach of hand, just a bowl each morning, placed with care, then distance. A slow trust measured in steps. If she moved too close, he would leave. If she kept the food too near the house, he wouldn't come. The stakes were simple. If he felt safe, he would eat. If not, he would vanish. And in his state, thin, exposed, alone, missing even one meal could mean days lost to weakness. Each morning she returned the bowl clean to the porch. She washed it, dried it, and waited. Not for thanks, not for company. Just the quiet rhythm of something choosing to return. By the end of the 2nd week, the grass beneath the gate had begun to press down under the weight of his paws. A path was forming. Faint, but real. He still didn't stay, but he came back. And that, May understood, was everything. The rain had started sometime in the night. By dawn, it fell hard and steady, washing down from the hills and flattening the tall grass near the roadside. Water pooled beneath the gate, trickling over the stones May had placed just days before. She stood under the porch roof, bowl in hand, eyes fixed on the place where he always appeared. But the brush beyond the gate held still. The fog, heavier in the downpour, clung low to the earth like breath held too long. He did not come. May waited, 10 minutes, then 20. She set the bowl down just inside the gate, beneath the shelter of a bent plank, and stepped back. Her boots left small, dark imprints on the porch steps. She stayed by the window until the sky shifted from gray to pale silver. Still nothing. By mid-morning, she had walked the stretch of gravel twice, along the fence line, through the ditches, up toward the pine copse where he sometimes disappeared. Her coat soaked through at the shoulders. The hood clung to her face, and every step made the mud pull at her boots. She called once, not his name because he didn't have one, just a low, brief sound. It was lost under the patter of water on leaves. If he had moved on, she told herself, that was his right. He was wild, not owned, not bound, but it didn't sit right, not in her chest. He had come every day, even in the wind. Even when food was gone, the quiet thread of his presence had taken hold in her mornings. And now the absence hung heavy. There were no paw prints along the path. No disturbed grass, only water and silence. She walked farther than before, into the trees past the fence where the deer trail crossed through. Her breath came slower now, controlled. The cold was starting to reach her hands. A blackbird startled from the low limbs. The rest was still. Then she saw it, a patch of turned leaves, wet but sunken, near a hollow beneath a fallen tree. The shape was difficult to see at first, wrapped in shadows, but as she stepped closer, her eyes adjusted. He was there. Curled into himself, legs tucked tight, head resting along his flank. He didn't rise, didn't even lift his eyes, just watched her through the quiet. His fur was soaked through, flattened to his ribs. The wound was visible now, along his rear leg, thin and red near the haunch. Not deep, but enough to slow him. Enough to explain the absence. He had tried to shelter, but the rain had reached even here. May didn't speak right away. She crouched, slowly, at a distance. Let her breath settle. Let him see her shape, her presence, her calm. "If you can walk, I'll follow," she said, voice soft enough not to cut the space between them. He didn't flinch, but he didn't rise either. She left the bowl on a dry patch near a cluster of roots, weighted it with a stone so it wouldn't tip. Then she stepped back the way she came, keeping her pace steady, her shoulders low. Each footfall was measured. By the time she reached the gate again, the bowl was still untouched. The sky remained low and heavy. The road is slick with runoff. If he couldn't move, he might not survive the cold. If infection set in, he would weaken fast. And if another night passed without food, his body would begin to turn against itself. The risk was no longer hunger, it was time. May stayed near the porch most of that day, watching the tree line. And late in the afternoon, when the rain eased and the air thickened with earth and bark, she thought she heard movement. Not loud, just enough to still her hands. But the gate remained empty. The water kept falling, soft now and steady. By dawn, the rain had thinned to a mist, drifting low and clinging to the field like breath held close to the earth. The ground near the fence had turned to dark mud, streaked with small runnels where the water had tried to escape. May stood with the bowl in her hands again, same spot, same quiet ritual. She wasn't sure he'd come. The injury she'd seen in the woods wasn't serious on its own. But in weather like this, alone, exposed, it was enough to tip the balance. But just after first light, a shape emerged from the tree line. He moved slowly, slower than she had ever seen him. One step, pause. Another step, pause again. His weight shifted awkwardly, favoring the left side. The back leg, the one marked red the day before, dragged slightly in the mud. His tail hung motionless. His ears twitched only once, then dropped low against his head. Water matted his coat, thick with grit and bark. Each movement looked calculated, not cautious now, just painful. He reached the gate but didn't cross it. He stood in the space just outside, breathing hard, his sides moving more than they should. His eyes lifted once toward the porch, then dropped again to the ground. May remained still. She had placed the bowl just inside the gate again, not far, not close. The line between offering and intrusion had to be honored. She crouched slowly, palms on her knees. Her breath was visible in the cool morning air. "You're almost there," she said, the words barely more than a whisper. The dog blinked. Nothing else moved. Then he sat, but not fully. His hindquarters trembled, and he leaned to one side, resting weight away from the injured leg. She could see how much the cold had gotten into him. The fur along his spine twitched, not from nerves, but chill. His ribs moved sharply with each breath. His mouth parted once, but closed again without sound. The bowl remained untouched. 10 minutes passed. He didn't come closer, but he didn't leave either. That, May knew, mattered. In his condition, walking back into the woods was risk, but crossing the gate line was trust. And trust, for a stray in pain, could not be asked for all at once. If he pushed himself, he could worsen the leg. If he hesitated too long, his strength would fade. Hunger was not the only threat now. The infection, the exposure, the cold, each worked against time. May stood and stepped back just slightly, not out of view, but enough to open space. She added nothing. Nothing changed, only watched. The stakes were clear. If he moved forward, he might eat. If not, he might not return. A soft wind stirred the trees above. A few loose pine needles dropped across the path. The dog shifted, leaning forward, then slowly pressed weight onto the injured leg. He stood, wobbled, then took 2 short steps. His nose lowered to the bowl. He didn't eat. Just stood over it, head down, breathing hard. May said nothing. Then, almost without effort, he lay down, not curled, not guarded, just flat, stretched on his uninjured side, ribs rising and falling. He closed his eyes. Not asleep. Just still. She let him rest. If he needed to stay there all morning, she would allow it. If he rose again, she would be ready. But for now, the quiet held. The fence stood open, the bowl untouched, the wind light. In the distance, the mist began to lift from the hilltops, revealing soft outlines of trees far beyond the clearing. One breath, then another. The world, for a moment, stayed still. The morning after he lay beside the bowl, May changed the rhythm. She did not bring food, no bowl, no water, only herself. She stepped through the gate slowly, easing down onto the ground with her back to the post and her legs bent at the knee. The grass was still damp. A cool breeze pressed across the hillside, and the faint smell of pine settled around her. She folded her hands in her lap and waited. Nothing else. It was nearly 20 minutes before the dog appeared. He came from the left this time, not the tree line, but the ditch beside the fence. His gait was uneven but more stable than the day before. He didn't pause at the opening, just stood, body lowered, and looked at her without raising his head. No bark, no sound, no movement forward. May kept still. She didn't speak. The quiet became the offering. His eyes moved from her shape to the ground between them. A distance not far, but not close enough to risk. His ears turned toward every passing sound. A bird shifting in the underbrush, the wind against the fence, a branch creaking overhead. His nose lifted once, then dropped again. He stayed in place. If he moved toward her, the risk was trust. If he stayed back, the cost was loneliness. But she asked nothing. No gesture, no coaxing, only presence. He lay down after some time, not far from the edge of the gate. His front paws crossed loosely. His side settled against the dirt. He didn't close his eyes this time. He watched her. Not fully, just through half-lowered lids, guarded but calm. The tension in his spine remained, but the sharpness of yesterday had softened. May leaned her head against the post, careful not to shift too suddenly. Her fingers moved over her knee. Slow circles. The wind moved her hair across her cheek. She let the silence fill the space between them. Each day that followed, she did the same. No food, no calls, no promises. Only herself, seated on the same patch of grass, body angled slightly away, always still. The dog began arriving earlier, sometimes just after dawn, sometimes even waiting when she stepped through the door. His path to the gate became more direct, less circling, less hesitation. By the fourth morning, he sat just inside the gate. He didn't lie down this time. He sat, watching. When May shifted her position, he didn't flinch. When her boot scraped slightly on the dirt, his ear twitched, but his body held. She offered a quiet line. "You can stay." He didn't move, but the moment held something different now. Less guardedness, more awareness. He was not here for food. There was none. He was not here for warmth. The sun hadn't risen high enough to warm the soil. He was here because she was. Still, the risk remained. If she reached out too soon, he might retreat. If he stayed too long, his instinct might pull him back into the wild. But trust, like healing, arrived in inches, and each inch mattered. On the sixth morning, he came closer. Only a few steps, but close enough that she could hear his breath when the wind dipped. Close enough that when a crow passed overhead, they both looked up at the same time, and neither startled the other. She didn't try to close the gap. When she rose to leave that day, he stayed a little longer after she was gone, watching the space she'd left behind. Then he too turned back toward the trees, not hurried, not hiding. A single leaf drifted across the gatepost in the breeze. The grass flattened beneath where they'd sat. Two shapes, two silences, side by side. The morning came colder than the ones before. The sky held a pale, overcast stillness, the kind that makes sound travel farther than it should. May stepped outside with bare hands and left the gate unlatched. It creaked softly in the breeze, swinging half open. No food today, no blanket. Just the gate, ajar. An invitation, not a request. She didn't sit this time, not right away. She stood by the post, just behind the opening, and let the space hold its shape. If he came, he would choose how close. If he didn't, she wouldn't follow. The dog arrived later than usual. He moved slowly, not from pain now, but with the same deliberate care he had always carried. His coat had begun to dry in patches from the days without rain. The limp was still there, not gone, but no longer worsening. His path was more direct. He made no wide arc today, no circling. When he reached the fence, his head tilted slightly. He saw the opening. He paused. May lowered herself slowly to the ground, hands resting at her sides. She didn't speak. Her breath moved in small clouds, quickly taken by the wind. The dog stood still, nose high, tail low, reading the air. One ear turned toward the woods. The other remained fixed on her. Then, slowly, he stepped forward. One paw touched the ground inside the line of the gate. Just the paw. Nothing more. His body stayed outside, but that single step crossed more than a distance. It crossed a habit, memory, fear. May watched without moving. She saw the tension in his shoulder, the tiny tremble as he held that pose. He wasn't ready to follow through. Not yet. But he hadn't turned away. She let the silence carry for a moment, then spoke. Low and steady. "It's okay, boy." His ears flicked once. His paw shifted slightly deeper into space. Not far, but enough to mark his decision. He remained like that for nearly a minute, then slowly withdrew. Not retreating, just pausing the attempt. May didn't follow. She stayed seated as he walked back out of the gate's mouth, circled once and lay in his usual spot just beyond the post. Close, closer than before. The risk had changed. It wasn't just distance now, it was the tension between his instinct and his need. He wanted proximity, but proximity came with vulnerability. If she moved too quickly, the trust might fold. If she stayed patient, he might try again. She let the gate hang open all morning. He didn't cross it that day. but his paw had touched the earth on her side. That was enough. By noon, the wind picked up. The grasses bowed gently at their tips, and the gate, still unlatched, drifted farther open with the breeze. Neither of them moved to close it. The next day brought colder air, the kind that clings to the ground and settles into the bones of anything still. May could feel it before she opened the door, how the frost had crept low and quiet through the trees overnight. The dog had come earlier again, waiting near the post with his weight pressed to the dirt, his legs still slightly curled beneath him. He didn't cross the threshold, but he didn't hide either. He was starting to linger longer after she stood up, starting to trust the quiet more than the distance. That afternoon, May gathered spare lumber from the tool shed. Old pieces, clean but weathered, once meant for repairs she never got around to. She worked slow, every motion deliberate. A few planks for walls, a piece of metal flashing for a roof, and a thick folded blanket laid gently at the center. No hammering, no sudden noise, just soft assembly by hand. The makeshift shelter stood just outside the gate, nestled into the slope beside the post. Low enough to feel safe. Wide enough for one body to curl inside without effort. She didn't coax him toward it, didn't lead or signal. She let it be. That evening, she brought no food. She sat again for a while, her breath rising in pale clouds, her coat zipped high. The wind pulled steady from the north, rattling the branches and driving small clusters of leaves across the gravel. The dog remained still at his usual place, head resting over one front paw, watching with those low, unreadable eyes. May nodded once before she rose to go inside. She left the gate ajar, left the shelter untouched, left the porch light off. What followed was not dramatic, not fast. It was one quiet choice after another. After darkness fell, May glanced once through the window. The fog had not yet returned, but the cold had thickened. The wind tugged gently at the tarp roof of the shelter. The bowl she'd left earlier had tipped in the dirt, and the dog was gone from his spot by the gate. She scanned the edge of the trees. Nothing, but when she looked closer, beneath the roof line of the shelter, she saw him, curled tight, nose tucked near flank, tail wrapped close. He wasn't sleeping, but his body had stilled. One ear flicked at a passing gust. His eyes remained open, but unfocused. There was no tension in his frame now, no strain. He didn't run. He didn't return to the woods. The stakes had shifted. He had accepted the shelter. That meant he was allowing the space to hold him, if only for a night. If he stayed dry, he could begin to heal faster. If the wound stayed clean, infection would remain at bay. But if something startled him, an animal, a light, a sound, he might bolt, and in his current state, a sudden run could undo what small progress had been made. May watched him until the windows fogged. Then she stepped back and let the darkness settle. That night, for the first time in weeks, the gate stayed open past dusk. No barking, no movement. Just the hum of wind across tin, and the faint rhythmic sound of a stray dog's breath beneath the roof she built for him. And in the stillness, the cold never reached his bones. The frost had long lifted. Days had warmed, slowly in that quiet way the season changes without announcement. The morning still came pale and thin, but the ground no longer held the cold the way it used to. Weeks had passed. The gate, once a line never crossed, now stood open without hesitation. The shelter remained tucked beneath the tree near the post, but it had become a resting place, not a refuge. The dog no longer arrived from the tree line. He began appearing from the eastern slope instead, the one that overlooked the shallow stream below the ridge. Each morning, just after first light, he stood at the gate, no longer waiting, just there, as if he belonged to the land, not the edge of it. May no longer brought food. He no longer waited for it. The bowl had been empty for days. Yet still he came. His body had changed. The ribs once visible beneath his coat had faded back under flesh. The limp, though still present, no longer marked every step. It softened now, more of a memory than a wound. He carried himself without flinch or tremble. He had become part of the rhythm of this place. Not healed completely, but whole enough to stay. That morning, May opened the gate and stepped into the garden. She didn't look for him, she didn't call, but he was already there. He walked beside her, not pressed close, just near. His head moved slowly as he scanned the ground. The sun had not yet cleared the trees, but light dappled through the branches, touching his back in broken patterns. His tail moved once, not high, not wagging, just low and steady, swaying faintly in time with his step. May walked to the far side of the garden, where the soil turned rich and dark near the fence. She knelt, pressing her hands gently into the ground, checking the root bed. The dog stayed behind her, watching, not tense, just quiet. She didn't speak, not this time. When she stood again, he followed her down the row, past the blackberry vines, past the overturned stones where beetles gathered, past the small fig tree that had yet to bloom. They moved together, wordless. Just motion, shared. She didn't reach to touch him. That had never been the point. There was no leash, no name, no command. But something between them held. A space once divided by fear had softened, filled with stillness instead of sound. He had chosen to stay, not because he owed her anything, but because she had asked for nothing. If he left tomorrow, it would be his choice. The woods still waited, vast and familiar. But for now, he walked with her, side by side, not seeking, just being. The wind moved gently through the tall grass beyond the garden. A dove stirred in the cypress above. The earth smelled of turned soil and early heat. May stood still as he passed her, just briefly, then paused ahead, waiting for her to follow. She did, and the gate, long behind them, drifted closed with the breeze.